My name is Rebecca Thompson, 32 years old, and 6 months ago, my husband Marcus threw me out of our mansion. Thanks for the $5 million inheritance, darling, he laughed, champagne glass in hand. I needed it to build my startup. Now get out, my new girlfriend needs space. His words cut through me like ice. I smiled and left quietly, wheeling my hastily packed suitcases down our marble driveway. What Marcus didn't know was that before he emptied my accounts, I had already taken precautions he couldn't imagine. Before I share what happened next, where are you watching from? Hit subscribe and like this video to find out how I turned this betrayal into my greatest triumph. Before the nightmare began, I was living what I thought was the American dream. After graduating from Columbia Law School, I'd worked my way up to become a senior corporate attorney at Harrington and Blake, one of Manhattan's most prestigious law firms. My specialty was contract law, and I had a reputation for attention to detail that made me valuable to both the firm and our clients. My career was demanding but fulfilling. I was making partner track and had built a life I was proud of. I met Marcus Reynolds at a charity gala for children's education. My firm had purchased a table, and I was representing our partners that evening. Marcus was seated at the adjacent table, and from the moment he introduced himself, I was captivated. Tall with piercing blue eyes and an infectious smile, he carried himself with the confidence of someone destined for greatness. Technology is going to reshape security as we know it, he told me over dessert, after smoothly finding a way to switch seats with another guest. My company is developing encryption software that will revolutionize how businesses protect their data. What struck me most wasn't just his intelligence or vision, it was how he listened. In a room full of people trying to impress each other, Marcus asked thoughtful questions about my work and ambitions. By the end of the evening, he had my number and a promise for dinner that weekend. Our courtship was a whirlwind of thoughtful gestures and deep conversations. Marcus would send flowers to my office with notes quoting obscure legal precedents he'd researched just to make me smile. He took me to hidden gem restaurants where chefs knew him by name. On weekends, we'd hike upstate and talk for hours about everything from childhood memories to our hopes for the future. I've never connected with anyone the way I connect with you, Rebecca, he told me 3 months in, as we watched the sunset from his modest, but tastefully furnished Brooklyn apartment. You challenge me intellectually and support me emotionally. I think I'm falling in love with you. Marcus was transparent about his business challenges. His startup, Secure Frame Technologies, had developed promising security software, but struggled with funding. Angel investors had provided initial capital, but the next phase of development required more substantial investment. The problem is timing, he explained. We're 18 months away from a product that will dominate the market, but venture capitalists want faster returns. I won't compromise on quality or security features to rush something inferior to market. I admired his integrity and vision. In a world where so many startups focused on quick exits, Marcus seemed genuinely passionate about creating something lasting and valuable. My family background was comfortable, though I never flaunted it. My father had built a successful construction company in Connecticut, and my mother managed their considerable real estate investments. They had raised me to value hard work and independence, which is why I had insisted on making my own way through law school and my career. The trajectory of our relationship changed dramatically when my parents died in a private plane crash returning from their anniversary trip to Martha's Vineyard. The loss was devastating and sudden. One moment I had loving parents planning their retirement. The next I was an only child facing unimaginable grief. Marcus was my rock during that dark period. He accompanied me to the funeral arrangements, held my hand through the services, and spent nights just sitting with me when sleep wouldn't come. He took time away from his company to help me sort through the initial estate issues and never once complained about the toll it was taking on his business. Your parents raised an incredible daughter, he said one evening as we sorted through family photographs. I wish I could have known them longer, but I promise you, Rebecca, I'll spend my life trying to be worthy of their daughter. 8 months after we met, Marcus proposed on the rooftop garden he had helped me plant at my apartment. It wasn't extravagant, just the two of us, string lights, and a vintage sapphire ring he said reminded him of my eyes. Life is unpredictable and precious, he said, kneeling before me. Losing your parents showed us that. I don't want to waste another day not being your husband. Our wedding was intimate but beautiful, held at my family's lake house in the Berkshires. Looking back, I should have noticed how Marcus subtly inquired about the progress of my parents' estate settlement during our honeymoon in Greece, or how his eyes lingered on the papers when my family's attorney updated me on the trust distribution timeline. But love blinded me to these warning signs. When Marcus commented that my family had really done well for themselves after seeing my childhood home, I took it as admiration rather than calculation. When he asked detailed questions about my inheritance expectations, I believed it was just part of merging our lives and planning our future together. I was so wrong. 13 months after my parents' death, the estate was finally settled. The construction company had been sold to my father's longtime partner. The real estate holdings were liquidated. And after taxes, I inherited just over $5 million. While the money could never replace my parents, I felt grateful for their provision and determined to honor their legacy by using it wisely. Marcus's reaction to the inheritance was subtle but telling. The night I received the final distribution, he brought home champagne and takeout from my favorite restaurant. To your parents, he toasted, and to new beginnings. Later that evening, as we sat on our terrace overlooking Central Park, we had upgraded to a larger apartment after our wedding. Marcus casually mentioned his company's funding situation. The Series A round is stalling, he sighed, swirling his champagne. Investors are hesitant about committing during this economic downturn. We might have to lay off the development team next month if something doesn't change. I felt the weight of his worry. For weeks, he'd been coming home later, stress etched across his face. Secure Frame was his dream, and the thought of it failing clearly devastated him. What would it take to keep things going? I asked. Marcus looked surprised by my question, as if he hadn't considered I might help. Honestly, about $3 million would fund us through product completion and initial market entry. But Rebecca, that's not your responsibility. We'll figure something out. His reluctance only made me more determined to support him. After all, isn't that what marriage was about? Supporting each other's dreams? What if I invested in Secure Frame? I suggested. Not as your wife, but as a legitimate investor. $3 million from my inheritance in exchange for equity and a position on the board. Marcus's expression shifted from surprise to cautious hope. You'd do that? But it's your inheritance. It's our future, I corrected him. I believe in you and the company. Let's talk to your corporate attorney about structuring it properly. Over the next week, Marcus presented me with business plans, financial projections, and market analyses. Everything looked promising. Secure Frame had innovative technology, a growing market need, and now would have the capital to execute their vision. The investment agreement promised me 25% equity and a board seat once the company established a formal board structure. I transferred $3 million to the company account, feeling both nervous and excited. That night, Marcus surprised me with a platinum bracelet. The first of many successes we'll celebrate together, he promised, fastening it around my wrist. Within weeks, I noticed subtle changes in our relationship. Marcus was suddenly working longer hours, often not returning until after midnight. Our weekend hikes became rarer, replaced by his networking events and development sessions. When we did spend time together, he was distracted, constantly checking his phone. The investment is accelerating everything, he explained when I expressed concern. We've hired 3 more developers and found a larger office space. This is the critical growth phase. It requires all hands on deck. I tried to be understanding. After all, I worked long hours myself during major cases. But as weeks turned into months, the distance between us grew. When I asked about my board position, Marcus assured me they weren't ready to formalize the board yet. "We're focusing on development first," he explained. "Board meetings would just slow us down right now. But your input is always welcome, Rebecca." Yet whenever I offered input or asked detailed questions about business operations, Marcus would provide vague answers or promise to discuss it when things settled down. He began having business dinners I wasn't invited to, explaining they were technical discussions that would bore me. 6 months after my investment, I noticed unusual expenses in our joint account, a $12,000 charge at Tiffany's, a weekend booking at the Mandarin Oriental, dining receipts from restaurants we hadn't visited together. When I questioned Marcus, he seemed annoyed by my micromanaging. "Those were client appreciation gifts and meetings," he said dismissively. The Tiffany purchase was for our top 3 investors' wives. Maintaining relationships is part of business. The hotel was for our lead developer who needed focused coding time without commuting. The explanations seemed plausible, but something felt off. When I pressed for details about these investors, Marcus accused me of not trusting him. "Is this how it's going to be now that you've invested? Monitoring every business expense like I'm embezzling?" "I'm building our future, Rebecca. I need your support, not your suspicion." Feeling guilty, I backed down. But the nagging feeling remained. The company grew rapidly. Within 8 months, Secure Frame had doubled its staff and moved to upscale offices in the Flatiron district. Marcus was featured in tech magazines as a founder to watch, and the prototype was generating buzz in industry circles. I should have been thrilled, but I felt increasingly excluded from both the business and my husband's life. When I finally insisted on seeing the company's financial statements as an investor, Marcus reluctantly arranged a meeting with their CFO, David. The meeting was repeatedly rescheduled and finally happened during lunch hour, giving us barely 30 minutes. "As you can see, we're on an accelerated growth trajectory," David explained, flipping through slides that showed impressive projections but few concrete current numbers. When I asked about specific expenses and revenue streams, David glanced nervously at Marcus. "Rebecca is just being thorough," Marcus said with a tight smile. "She's a lawyer, after all." After the meeting, we had our first major argument in the car. "That presentation told me nothing about how my investment is actually being used," I said. "Why weren't there detailed expense breakdowns or cash flow statements?" "Because we're a startup, not a publicly traded company," Marcus snapped. "Things move quickly, and we don't waste time generating needless reports when we should be building product. If you don't trust me to run the company I founded, maybe you shouldn't have invested." "This isn't about trust," I countered. "It's about basic financial transparency that any investor deserves." Marcus's expression hardened. "Is that what you are now? Just an investor? Not my supportive wife?" His words stung, making me question myself. Was I being unreasonable? Unsupportive? By the time we reached home, I was apologizing for being overly suspicious, and Marcus was reassuring me that everything was going according to plan. "The product launch is 6 months away," he said, suddenly warm again. "After that, you'll see everything was worth it. Your investment will likely triple in value within the first year on the market." I wanted desperately to believe him. But that night, as he slept soundly beside me, I lay awake wondering how we had gone from partners to this strained relationship where questioning him made me the villain. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of his betrayal. As Secure Frame approached its beta testing phase, Marcus became virtually absent from our marriage. He would leave before I woke up and return long after I'd gone to bed. Weekends were consumed by emergency development sessions and investor meetings. The few times we did speak, conversations revolved around his achievements and company milestones, never about us or our future together. "The Berlin Technology Conference was incredible," he'd say, showing me photos of himself with tech celebrities and venture capitalists. "Everyone's talking about our encryption approach. We've got 3 major corporations interested in enterprise licensing once we launch." When I asked why I hadn't been invited to accompany him to Berlin, his answer was quick and practiced. It was all technical sessions and business networking, Rebecca. You would have been bored sitting in the hotel room alone while I attended meetings. Our credit card statements told a different story. Receipts for dinners at romantic restaurants, spa treatments for two, and shopping excursions at high-end boutiques suggested his Berlin trip wasn't solely business. When I confronted him, Marcus dismissed my concerns with practiced ease. Of course I entertained clients, he said, scrolling through his phone without meeting my eyes. That's how business works in Europe. The spa charge was a gift certificate for our German distributor's wife as a thank you for hosting our team dinner. Each explanation was plausible in isolation, but formed a troubling pattern. During this period, I found myself increasingly isolated. My focus at work had suffered due to the stress at home, leading to a junior associate taking over one of my major cases. Friends I'd neglected during the early romantic days with Marcus had moved on with their lives, and those who remained expressed concerns I wasn't ready to hear. You don't seem happy anymore, Rebecca, my college roommate Stephanie observed during our rare lunch together. When was the last time you and Marcus actually did something fun together? I defended him reflexively. He's building something important. This intense period won't last forever. But even as I spoke the words, I questioned their truth. The intense period had stretched from weeks to months with no end in sight. The discovery that shattered my remaining trust came unexpectedly. Marcus had left his tablet at home during a rushed morning departure. When a notification chimed, I glanced at the screen to see a message preview from someone named Amber that read, "Missing you already. Last night was." The message cut off there, but my stomach dropped. I knew I shouldn't look, that privacy was important in a marriage. But hadn't Marcus already violated that trust with his secretive behavior and questionable explanations? With shaking hands, I opened the message. What I found was dozens of intimate exchanges between my husband and this woman dating back nearly 4 months. Photos, plans for meetings, explicit messages about their time together. In one exchange, Marcus complained about having to attend a charity event with the wife when he'd rather be with Amber. When confronted that evening, Marcus didn't even attempt to deny the relationship. Instead, he transformed before my eyes, his charming demeanor replaced by cold calculation. "Amber Matthews is our new marketing director," he said calmly, pouring himself a scotch. "Yes, we've become close. These things happen in startups, people working long hours together, sharing the same vision." "Marketing director?" I repeated incredulously. "These messages aren't about marketing strategies, Marcus." He shrugged, taking a slow sip of his drink. "Business and pleasure sometimes overlap. She understands the demands of building a company in ways you never could." His casual cruelty stunned me into silence. This wasn't just an affair, it was a complete rewriting of our marriage narrative. My investigative instincts kicked in. The next day, while Marcus was at the office, I researched this Amber Matthews. She had no marketing background whatsoever. Her LinkedIn profile showed a former model with a brief stint at a PR firm before suddenly becoming marketing director at SecureFrame, with a salary I later discovered was nearly double the mark. T-rate for someone with her non-existent qualifications. More disturbing was what I found when I finally accessed the company records Marcus had been keeping from me. As an investor, I had legal rights to this information, though I had to threaten legal action to the company secretary to obtain them. The documents revealed that while SecureFrame was projecting success to potential investors, Marcus had been systematically moving company funds into personal accounts. Luxury cars purchased as company vehicles, a vacation property in Aspen listed as a corporate retreat facility, and most alarmingly, my ownership percentage had been diluted through multiple new stock issuances that I had never been notified about. My supposed 25% stake was now barely 3%. While a new holding company called AM Ventures Amber Matthews, I presumed, held 15%. Armed with this information, I confronted Marcus that evening in his home office. For once, I caught him unprepared. "You've been embezzling from the company," I stated flatly, placing the documents on his desk. "And you've diluted my shares without proper notification, which violates securities regulations." Marcus's expression flickered between surprise and anger before settling into something colder. "I founded this company," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Every decision I've made has been to ensure its success. Your investment was appreciated, but ultimately, it's my vision that's building SecureFrame into something valuable. That doesn't give you the right to steal or violate securities laws," I countered. "Or to betray our marriage." Marcus laughed, the sound devoid of humor. "Our marriage? Let's be honest, Rebecca. I married you knowing your parents were wealthy. When they died sooner than expected, it accelerated my timeline. You were useful for your inheritance and your legal knowledge. But Amber shares my ambitions in ways you never could." His confession, delivered so callously, knocked the air from my lungs. 3 years of marriage reduced to a financial transaction. "You never loved me," I whispered, the truth finally clear. "I appreciated you," he corrected, as if that distinction mattered. "And you benefited too, access to tech circles you'd never have entered otherwise. A lifestyle beyond what your lawyer's salary provides. I want my investment back," I demanded, fighting to keep my voice steady. "All of it." Marcus's smile was predatory. "Unfortunately, that money has been fully deployed in company operations. As for your shares, they're worth whatever the market says they're worth. Feel free to consult your lawyer colleagues, but you'll find I've insulated myself quite thoroughly." With those words, my husband became my adversary. As I left his office that night, I knew our marriage was over. What I didn't know yet was how thoroughly he planned to destroy me before I could expose what he'd done. The day after my confrontation with Marcus, I called Jessica Harper, my law school roommate who now specialized in financial crimes at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. We met at a small coffee shop far from my usual haunts, where I laid out everything I had discovered. Jessica listened intently, occasionally jotting notes, her expression growing more troubled with each revelation. "Rebecca, this isn't just a bad marriage," she said finally. "What you're describing is securities fraud, wire fraud, and potentially money laundering. Marcus has been using the company as his personal piggy bank while soliciting investments under false pretenses. Can I get my money back?" I asked, focusing on the most immediate concern. Jessica's grimace told me everything before she spoke. "It's complicated. Corporate funds commingled with personal assets, multiple shell companies. Recovering your investment won't be simple or quick. And Marcus sounds like someone who would rather burn everything down than admit defeat. So what do I do?" I felt utterly lost, my personal and financial life simultaneously imploding. "First, secure whatever assets remain in your name alone," Jessica advised. "Second, gather evidence systematically without alerting Marcus. And third, prepare for things to get ugly. Men like your husband don't surrender power willingly." Following Jessica's advice, I hired Michael Donovan, a private investigator specializing in financial cases. Michael's work was thorough and damning. Over 3 weeks, he documented Marcus's affair with Amber through photographs and witness statements. More crucially, he traced financial transfers showing how Marcus had moved company money through shell corporations and into personal accounts in the Cayman Islands. "He's been planning this for at least a year," Michael explained, showing me the financial timeline. The account structures suggest he anticipated potentially having to shield assets from either corporate creditors or a divorce settlement. The most disturbing discovery came when Michael obtained internal company documents through a source at SecureFrame. Buried in board minutes I was never invited to attend was evidence that Marcus had issued additional stock specifically to dilute my ownership percentage. while simultaneously representing to new investors that the company's valuation had increased fivefold. He's selling the same pie twice, Michael explained. Telling investors the company is worth $50 million to extract high-priced investments, while telling you the company can't distribute any returns because they're reinvesting in growth. Classic fraud scheme. Armed with this evidence, I scheduled a consultation with Eleanor Walsh, a prominent attorney known for handling complex business divorces. Her office in a sleek downtown skyscraper projected exactly the power I needed on my side. "You have options," Eleanor said after reviewing my documents, "but we need to move quickly." Marcus has been systematically positioning himself to claim the company's success is unrelated to your investment. Under Eleanor's guidance, I began preparing for legal warfare. We documented every asset, every conversation, every suspicious transaction. I withdrew the remaining $2 million from my inheritance that was still in my personal accounts and moved it to new accounts Marcus couldn't access. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about justice and refusing to be another victim of his manipulation. I maintained a facade of normalcy at home, pretending I was processing our marital issues while secretly preparing my counterattack. Marcus, believing he had broken my spirit, became careless. He left documents in his home office that further incriminated him. He took calls from Amber in adjoining rooms, discussing not just their relationship, but their plans for the company once I was out of the picture. The final betrayal came without warning. I returned from work on a Thursday evening to find divorce papers waiting on our kitchen counter. Marcus hadn't even had the decency to tell me face to face. Attached was a proposed settlement offering me $100,000. A pittance compared to my $3 million investment, along with a letter from his attorney claiming the company was struggling financially despite market interest. When Marcus finally came home near midnight, he acted as though the divorce papers were a mutual decision we had somehow reached. "It's for the best, Rebecca," he said, loosening his tie and pouring a drink. "We've grown apart. The settlement is generous considering the company's current cash position." "Is that what your lawyer told you to say?" I asked quietly. He smiled condescendingly. "I'm trying to make this easy for both of us. Don't turn this into a drawn-out legal battle you can't win. My corporate attorneys are better than whatever divorce lawyer you'll find." What Marcus didn't know was that I had already filed my own legal actions that day, not just for divorce, but a separate civil suit against him for fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. I had also scheduled meetings with the SEC and the Manhattan DA's office for the following week. I said nothing of this to Marcus. Instead, I simply nodded and went to bed in our guest room, listening as he made a late-night call to Amber, laughing about how she took it pretty well and won't cause problems. I fell asleep that night with a strange sense of calm. The man I had loved was gone, perhaps had never existed. In his place was an opponent who had underestimated me for the last time. I returned home from work the following Monday to find the locks changed on our apartment. Marcus stood in the lobby with 2 security guards and several packed suitcases that contained a hasty selection of my belongings. Company counsel advised me to secure our assets during the divorce, he announced loudly enough for the doorman and several residents to hear. "You'll be staying elsewhere from now on." The humiliation burned through me as curious neighbors pretended not to watch. Marcus maintained a practiced expression of regretful determination, like a husband reluctantly enforcing boundaries with an unstable wife. "Your personal items are packed," he continued, gesturing to the suitcases. "Anything missing can be arranged through our attorneys." When I tried to enter the elevator to retrieve more of my belongings, one security guard stepped forward. "I'm sorry, ma'am. We have instructions not to allow you upstairs." "This is my home," I protested, fighting to maintain composure. "You can't just throw me out without notice." Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice. "The apartment is in my name, Rebecca. A precaution I took knowing your family wealth might make you difficult during a separation." He smiled that charming smile that had once made me fall in love with him. "I've called you a car. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." As if on cue. The front doors opened and a woman with a model's figure and calculated casual elegance entered. Amber Matthews was even more beautiful in person than in her photos. Tall, blonde, and at least 10 years younger than me. She stopped short upon seeing the scene, feigning surprise that fooled no one. "Oh, I didn't realize you'd still be." "I can come back," she offered Marcus, playing her role perfectly. "No need," Marcus replied, eyes locked on me. Rebecca was just leaving. That's when he delivered the final blow, in a voice just loud enough for the gathered spectators to hear. "Thanks for the $5 million inheritance, darling. I needed it to build my startup. Now get out. My new girlfriend needs space." Amber had the decency to look embarrassed, but made no move to leave. Marcus laughed softly, champagne glass in hand from whatever celebration they had planned, watching for my reaction. In that moment, I had a choice: create a scene that would only reinforce whatever narrative Marcus had already established with our social circle, or leave with dignity and bide my time. I chose the latter. I smiled, took my suitcases, and walked out without another word. The car Marcus had called took me to a mid-range hotel downtown. Sitting alone in that impersonal room, surrounded by hastily packed belongings, the full weight of the past 3 years crashed down on me. I had lost my parents, my husband, my home, and a significant portion of my inheritance, all within 36 months. I spent that night cycling through grief, rage, and self-recrimination. How had I not seen Marcus's true nature earlier? How many red flags had I ignored? Was I so desperate for connection after losing my parents that I had willfully blinded myself to his manipulation? The next morning, I rented a small, furnished apartment in a neighborhood far less prestigious than our Central Park view. The contrast was stark, from 3,000 square feet of luxury to a one-bedroom walk-up with unreliable heat. I took a week off work, claiming a family emergency, and barely left the apartment. My darkest moment came when I saw the announcement in TechCrunch: SecureFrame secures $30 million Series B round. Valuation tops $120 million. The accompanying photo showed Marcus and Amber at what appeared to be a celebration party, champagne glasses raised. The article praised Marcus's innovative leadership and quoted investors excited about the company's upcoming public launch. There was no mention of my investment that had saved the company when it was weeks from bankruptcy. No acknowledgement of the legal expertise I had contributed in the early days, reviewing contracts and partnerships. I had been completely erased from the company's story. That night, I sat on my rental apartment floor surrounded by takeout containers and legal documents, questioning everything. Maybe Marcus was right. Maybe I should take the insulting settlement and try to rebuild my life. Fighting him would be expensive, exhausting, and success was far from guaranteed. He had resources, connections, and apparently no ethical boundaries. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was a photo of Marcus and Amber dining at our favorite restaurant, followed by, "He's upgraded. Accept it and move on." The cruelty of the anonymous message, sent either by Amber or one of her friends, should have pushed me deeper into despair. Instead, something hardened inside me. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about justice, about refusing to let someone profit from such calculated exploitation. I texted Jessica, "I'm ready to fight back. All the way." Her response came immediately. "Finally. Meeting tomorrow, 8 a.m., my office. Bring everything." The next morning, I showered, dressed in my best suit, and walked into Jessica's office with a clear head and cold determination. No more tears, no more self-pity. Marcus had declared war, but he had no idea who he was fighting. "Before we start," I told Jessica and Eleanor as we sat down, "I want to be clear about my objectives. I don't just want my money back. I want the truth about SecureFrame and Marcus Reynolds exposed. I want justice. Eleanor smiled for the first time since I'd met her. Now that's a client I can work with. Over the next 12 hours, we built the strategy that would become Marcus's downfall. What he had failed to understand about me, what perhaps no one fully appreciated, was that beneath my compassionate exterior was a woman trained to notice details, analyze weaknesses, and construct airtight arguments. He had taught me about betrayal. Now I would teach him about consequences. The counterattack began quietly. No dramatic confrontations or public accusations, just methodical, strategic moves that Marcus wouldn't see coming until it was too late. My first meeting was with senior investigator Robert Callahan at the Securities and Exchange Commission. Eleanor had connections from her previous work as an SEC attorney, allowing us to bypass preliminary channels. These documents suggest a pattern of securities violations, Callahan noted, reviewing our evidence. Particularly concerning is the misrepresentation to investors about company valuation and the unauthorized dilution of your shares. Mr. Reynolds has been operating under the assumption that his ex-wife will be too embarrassed to pursue this, Eleanor explained. He's mistaken. Callahan nodded. We'll open a formal investigation. This will take time, but based on what I'm seeing, there are serious issues here. While the SEC investigation proceeded quietly, I executed the next phase of our plan. Through Eleanor's connections, I arranged meetings with 3 of SecureFrame's major investors, people who had come on board after my initial funding saved the company. The first meeting was with James Harrington, a venture capitalist who had led the recent Series B round. His corner office overlooking the Hudson River projected success and confidence, exactly what we needed to shake. I appreciate you meeting with me, Mr. Harrington, I began. I believe you haven't been given accurate information about SecureFrame's founding and finances. His expression remained neutral. I've done extensive due diligence, Ms. Thompson. Did that due diligence include knowledge that the company was within weeks of bankruptcy before my $3 million investment? Or that Marcus Reynolds has been moving company funds through these shell corporations? I slid documentation across his polished desk. As Harrington reviewed the materials, his practiced composure slipped. These offshore transfers weren't disclosed during our financial review, nor was the pending SEC investigation, I imagine, Eleanor added, which will become public within weeks. By the end of our meeting, Harrington was ashen-faced. What exactly are you seeking here, Ms. Thompson? Truth and accountability, I replied simply. I suggest you review your position before the SEC findings become public. Distancing yourself from fraud is always better done early. Similar meetings with 2 other key investors yielded similar results, shock followed by serious concern about their exposure. None had been told about my founding investment or the questionable financial maneuvers Marcus had been executing. My third strategic move involved Taylor Ross, an investigative journalist at TechJournal known for exposés on startup culture. We met at a quiet cafe in Brooklyn, far from the tech industry's usual haunts. Most tech fraud stories follow the same pattern, Ross explained, reviewing our documents. Charismatic founder, exaggerated capabilities, creative accounting. But the deliberate betrayal angle here adds a dimension readers will find compelling. I'm not interested in personal revenge narratives, I clarified. This is about exposing securities fraud and investor deception. Ross smiled. With respect, Ms. Thompson, it's both. And that's what will make this story powerful. When do you want this published? We'll let you know the exact timing, Eleanor interjected. Coordination with other elements is crucial. While these pieces moved into place, I continued gathering evidence. Michael Donovan's investigation had uncovered that Marcus was planning a major product launch event in 3 weeks, a showcase for investors and potential clients that would cement SecureFrame's mark. Position and likely lead to another round of funding. It's being held at the Edison Ballroom, Michael reported. Nearly 300 invited guests, technology demonstrations, major industry speakers. Reynolds is sparing no expense, using company funds, of course. This event would become the stage for Marcus's downfall. We timed everything to converge the day before the launch. The first domino fell when the SEC issued formal requests for documents from SecureFrame's financial institutions. Marcus likely received notification that morning, but by then, more problems were materializing. James Harrington's venture capital firm issued a press release postponing additional investment pending completion of expanded due diligence procedures. 2 other investors followed suit within hours. By afternoon, Taylor Ross's detailed investigation appeared on TechJournal's website and was quickly picked up by other technology publications. The headline pulled no punches: security startup built on deception, fraud allegations, and misused millions at SecureFrame. The article detailed my founding investment, Marcus's systematic dilution of my shares, and the questionable financial transactions our investigation had uncovered. It included statements from unnamed investors expressing concern about disclosure failures and potential regulatory issues. What made the story explode across tech Twitter wasn't just the fraud allegations, but the personal betrayal element, complete with the locked-out-of-home scene witnesses had corroborated. Within hours, Marcus became the embodiment of tech bros behaving badly. As SecureFrame's public relations team scrambled to respond, the final blow landed. Based on our evidence, the SEC obtained an emergency court order freezing certain company accounts pending investigation of potential securities violations. I wasn't there to see Marcus's reaction as his carefully constructed empire began crumbling, but I received a play-by-play from a sympathetic executive assistant at SecureFrame who had witnessed his verbal abuse of staff for months. He got the SEC notice during a pre-launch meeting. She texted, started screaming about witch hunts and vengeful exes. Then the investor announcements hit, followed by the article. He threw his laptop across the conference room. By evening, Marcus was desperate. His calls and texts bombarded my phone. What have you done? You're destroying everything we built. This is insane. You need to call off the SEC. We can work this out. I'll restore your shares. I didn't respond to any of his messages. Instead, I watched from a strategic distance as chaos engulfed SecureFrame's headquarters. The launch event was officially postponed by the venue after the company's credit card payments were reversed due to the account freeze. The real satisfaction came the following morning. I arrived at SecureFrame's offices accompanied by Eleanor, Michael, and 2 SEC investigators with a court order permitting review of specific company records. The receptionist's eyes widened upon seeing me. Miss Thompson. I didn't. Mr. Reynolds isn't accepting visitors. This isn't a social call, I replied calmly. As one investigator presented the court documents, we were escorted to the main conference room where Marcus sat with 2 attorneys and a visibly distressed CFO. Amber was nowhere to be seen. Marcus looked terrible, unshaven, red-eyed, his usual polished appearance replaced by rumpled desperation. When he saw me, his expression cycled rapidly through shock, fury, and finally a calculating assessment. Rebecca, he attempted a conciliatory tone. This has gotten completely out of hand. Whatever issues we have personally shouldn't affect the company. Hundreds of jobs are at stake. Interesting you should mention that, I replied coolly. I've been concerned about those employees since discovering how you've misappropriated company funds. While the SEC investigators began their document review with the CFO, Marcus attempted to regain control. Look, I acknowledge I handled our separation poorly. I was under tremendous pressure. We can renegotiate your equity position, revisit the settlement terms. We're well beyond negotiation, Marcus, I stated flatly. The SEC has questions about securities fraud. Investors have questions about your disclosures. And I have evidence of how you've been moving company money into personal accounts. His facade cracked. You vindictive bitch. You'll get nothing when I'm finished. Eleanor stepped forward. Mr. Reynolds, I suggest you watch your language and consult with your attorneys before making further statements. MS. Thompson has documentation of every fraudulent transaction and misrepresentation. Your professional future is hanging by a very thin thread. Over the next several days, Secure Frame imploded spectacularly. The SEC investigation expanded. Investors initiated their own forensic accounting reviews, and key employees began departing. Amber disappeared from both the company and Marcus's life when the company credit cards she'd been using were deactivated. Marcus made one final desperate attempt at salvaging his position, calling an emergency board meeting to which I was deliberately not invited despite my shareholder status. Unfortunately for him, 2 board members had already begun cooperating with investigators to protect themselves from liability. I received a call from James Harrington the evening after that meeting. "We've removed Reynolds as CEO," he informed me. "The board has approved a comprehensive audit and cooperation with all regulatory investigations." "And my equity position?" I asked. "Your original 25% ownership has been formally acknowledged and will be restored in the company records," he confirmed. Additionally, given your background and intimate knowledge of the company's history, the board would like to discuss a leadership role during this transition period. 1 week after being humiliatingly thrown out of my home, I walked into Secure Frame's offices as acting chief executive officer. The employees who gathered in the main conference room looked shell-shocked by the rapid turn of events. "Many of you don't know me," I began. "I'm Rebecca Thompson. My investment helped launch this company when it was struggling for survival. Recent events have obviously created uncertainty, but I want to assure you that the technology and vision of Secure Frame remain valuable and worth protecting." I outlined my immediate priorities: cooperating fully with investigators, implementing proper financial controls, and focusing on completing the product that was genuinely innovative. The relief in the room was palpable. Many had feared losing their jobs amid the chaos. As for Marcus, his fall was swift and complete. The SEC investigation led to civil charges for securities violations. The Manhattan DA's office initiated a separate investigation into potential wire fraud based on evidence we provided. His assets were frozen, reputation destroyed, and professional future erased. The final piece of my revenge came when I received a text from an unknown number. I should have picked a smarter man to hitch my wagon to. "Sorry about the restaurant photo. No hard feelings?" It was Amber, of course. I didn't bother responding. Some people never learn, and some lessons shouldn't need teaching in the first place. 6 months after being thrown out of my home with nothing but hastily packed suitcases, I sat in the CEO's office at Secure Frame, reviewing quarterly projections that showed the company recovering from the crisis. The product Marcus had envisioned was indeed innovative and valuable, perhaps his only genuine contribution. I had no interest in permanent leadership, but I was determined to stabilize the company, protect the jobs of innocent employees, and recover my investment before moving on to whatever came next in my life. That afternoon, I received an envelope containing Marcus's final divorce settlement agreement. His arrogance had dissolved into desperation, and he agreed to all my terms without contest. The man who had hoped to walk away with millions had lost everything: his company, his reputation, his freedom. He was facing criminal charges and any financial gain from his elaborate fraud. I signed the papers without emotion. This chapter of my life was ending, but the lessons would remain. I had learned the hard way about trust, vigilance, and the importance of believing what people show you about themselves. Most importantly, I had discovered a strength within myself that no betrayal could diminish. Marcus had underestimated me. He had expected his betrayed wife to crumble, to accept humiliation and injustice rather than fight. He had believed his charm and connections would shield him from consequences. He had been wrong on every count. The company security badge on my desk caught the afternoon sunlight, the Secure Frame logo gleaming. How ironically appropriate that a company built to protect others from threats had failed to recognize the greatest threat was its founder's own hubris, and that the woman he dismissed would ultimately be its salvation. 1 year after the implosion of Marcus's schemes, Secure Frame had transformed from a scandal-plagued startup to an industry success story. Under my interim leadership, we had weathered the SEC investigation, implemented proper financial controls, and finally brought our innovative security software to market. The product itself was genuinely revolutionary, earning industry accolades and quickly establishing a solid customer base. The tragedy was that Marcus's actual vision had merit had he built the company honestly. He might have achieved legitimate success rather than fraudulent gain. My first priority had been stabilizing the company for the dedicated employees who had been innocent victims of Marcus's deceptions. I restructured the executive team, bringing in ethical leaders and promoting talented staff who had previously been overlooked, particularly women engineers who had been marginalized under Marcus's leadership. Your 6-month contract as interim CEO has ended, James Harrington noted during our board meeting. The board unanimously hopes you'll consider a permanent position. I appreciated the vote of confidence, but knew my path lay elsewhere. I've accomplished what I came to do, I replied. The company is stable, profitable, and has the right leadership team in place. It's time for me to move on. With the board's blessing, I transitioned leadership to our CTO, Angela Rivera, a brilliant security engineer who had developed much of the core technology. Angela had the technical expertise and ethical foundation to lead Secure Frame into its next chapter. Under her leadership, the company would expand internationally and eventually complete a successful IPO, turning my restored 25% equity stake into a substantial fortune. Marcus's legal consequences provided no satisfaction, only a sense that justice had prevailed. He ultimately accepted a plea deal on securities fraud charges, 3 years in a minimum security prison plus restitution. The man who had orchestrated such elaborate betrayal couldn't even face a trial, turning instead to negotiation when confronted with overwhelming evidence. I never spoke to him again after that day in the Secure Frame conference room. There were no dramatic courtroom confrontations or emotional closure conversations. Our communication occurred entirely through attorneys, and I preferred it that way. Marcus had already taken enough of my energy. He wouldn't get a minute more. Amber's fate was less severe, but perhaps more fitting. After abandoning Marcus when his assets were frozen, she attempted to rebuild her influencer brand, only to become a cautionary tale in tech circles. Her involvement with Secure Frame followed her, making legitimate companies wary of association. Last I heard, she was dating a cryptocurrency entrepreneur with his own questionable business practices. Some people never learn. My personal healing took longer than my professional recovery. I started therapy to understand how I had missed so many warning signs and to process the compound grief of losing my parents and my marriage in such close succession. You've experienced extraordinary betrayal, my therapist observed during one session. Yet you've responded with resilience rather than bitterness. That's remarkable. It hadn't felt remarkable at the time, just necessary. But as months passed, I recognized that navigating this crisis had fundamentally changed me. I was more discerning, more confident in my instincts, and paradoxically, more open to authentic connection despite the betrayal. The professional fallout had unexpected benefits. My handling of the Secure Frame crisis earned respect in legal and business circles, leading to board invitations and consulting opportunities. I eventually established a boutique practice specializing in helping investors identify potential fraud in early-stage companies, turning my painful experience into expertise that protected others. But the most meaningful outcome was the foundation I established with a portion of my Secure Frame proceeds. The Second Chance Foundation provided legal and financial support to victims of financial fraud, particularly those exploited by intimate partners. Our work helped dozens of people reclaim not just assets, but dignity. Your foundation saved my life. One client told me, a woman whose husband had stolen her retirement savings. Not just the legal help, but knowing someone understood and believed me. Those moments of impact brought healing that no court judgment or financial recovery could provide. They transformed my victimization into purpose. Reconnecting with friends and family provided another layer of recovery. I had isolated myself during my marriage to Marcus, partly due to grief over my parents and partly through his subtle manipulation. Rebuilding those relationships meant acknowledging my withdrawal and accepting their legitimate concerns about Marcus that I had dismissed. I tried to tell you he seemed controlling. My college roommate Stephanie admitted over dinner. But you seemed so happy, I backed off. I wouldn't have listened anyway, I acknowledged. I needed to see it for myself, unfortunately. 2 years after my divorce, I met Daniel at a legal conference where I was speaking about financial fraud detection, a federal prosecutor with the white-collar crime division. He approached me after my presentation with thoughtful questions and a genuine interest in my foundation's work. Our relationship developed slowly and deliberately. I was transparent about my trust issues, and he was patient with my caution. When he proposed a year later, we had already built a partnership based on mutual respect and radical honesty. I'm not asking you to trust blindly, he said, taking my hand on a walk through Central Park. I'm asking for the chance to earn your trust every day for the rest of our lives. The wedding was small and intimate, held at my family's lake house, reclaiming a place that held both painful and beautiful memories. Daniel's steady presence beside me as I scattered some of my parents' ashes along the shoreline symbolized the healing that comes from allowing new joy to grow alongside old grief. Looking back on the extraordinary journey from betrayal to rebuilding, I recognize now that Marcus's greatest miscalculation wasn't underestimating my intelligence or determination. It was assuming that breaking me would be his victory, never imagining that the pieces would reassemble into something stronger than before. The inheritance he stole was ultimately replaced many times over through my secure frame equity. The love he betrayed made room for a deeper, more authentic connection. The professional setback he orchestrated led to a more meaningful career path. In his attempt to destroy me, he inadvertently cleared the path to a more purposeful life. There's a Japanese art form called kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired with gold, making the repair a beautiful part of the object's history rather than something to hide. My life after Marcus became my personal kintsugi, the broken places mended with wisdom, resilience, and purpose, creating something more valuable than what existed before. If you're watching this and facing your own betrayal, whether financial, emotional, or both, please know that the initial devastation doesn't determine your story's ending. Trust your instincts. Document everything, seek competent help, and remember that rebuilding takes time but creates a foundation stronger than before. The greatest revenge isn't destruction, but creation. Building a life so full and purposeful that the betrayal becomes merely a chapter rather than the whole story. My name is Rebecca Thompson. And that's how I transformed the worst betrayal of my life into my greatest triumph. Have you ever had to rebuild after betrayal or loss? What helped you move forward? Share your story in the comments below, and if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that healing is possible. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes our greatest strength emerges from our most painful moments.